So welcome everyone to this masterclass about Bitcoin for beginners. Our goal really today is to give you the easiest explanation possible that we can about what Bitcoin is, why you should love it, and how you should use it. This is me. My name is Jan. I do business development at Synonym. And next to me over here is Aldert. He is the lead designer at Synonym. Okay, so if you are new to Bitcoin, you might find it a bit difficult, a bit clunky, a bit unusual, a bit weird, and maybe it even seems a bit risky or dangerous. The very first thing that we will do today is explain why this is a typical reaction for newcomers to Bitcoin. After that, we are going to the best that we can, offer the easiest explanation possible, at least to us, of what Bitcoin is, why you should love it, and how you can use it. So I will do the first two sections of the presentation, and then Aldert will take over from me and do the other two sections. Okay, so let's start with why Bitcoin might be a bit perplexing and unusual and unintuitive to newcomers. We think there are really three main reasons. Reason number one, Bitcoin is really a new thing. So Satoshi did not just invent beer with a slightly different flavor. Bitcoin is a real innovation, something that breaks with the past, that is difficult to relate to things that already exist. And human beings struggle with new things. This is why we used to call cars horseless wagons, or movies talking pictures, and why we used to call the internet the information superhighway. Second, if you really dig into the lower level details of Bitcoin, it's incredibly complicated. If you want to understand exactly how the blockchain works, what miners are, what proof of work is, and so on, you need to be versed in cryptography, system design, monetary policy, the history of money, and so on. Typical person is not extremely well versed in all those subjects. Maybe in one, but certainly not in all of them. And a lot of this complexity still runs through the narratives about Bitcoin, and I think that's because a lot of the narrative is still dominated by developers, builders, innovators, and people who were early to Bitcoin. What's more, in a lot of our products and services, a lot of that complexity is still also at the forefront. It takes time to hide the complexity that is in new things, and Bitcoin is perhaps about halfway. Final reason. Bitcoin is surrounded by fear, by hype, by crime, by a whole lot of copycats that pretend to be Bitcoin but aren't really Bitcoin, by faulty information spread out of ignorance, and by intentionally placed misinformation. Let's describe it that way. So you might say Bitcoin is surrounded by a bit of chaos, and the media, of course, love a little bit of chaos, and they focus on it very heavily. And the consequences is that a lot of people who are new to Bitcoin and a lot of average people out there who don't know much about Bitcoin have a bit of a negative perception about it. So, just to sum up, why is for newcomers Bitcoin often a bit perplexing and counterintuitive? One, because it's a new thing. Two, it's a new thing with a lot of complexity still at the forefront. And three, it's surrounded by a bit of chaos that the media really feeds upon. Now, it's important to understand that none of this is really unusual for new technologies. This is a car from the early 20th century. When cars came out, or were relatively new for the most typical people, they kind of sucked. They were slow, they were sluggish, they were difficult to operate. In fact, they were quite dangerous. And some of the earliest car users were in fact criminals. A good example here is the Bonneau gang that operated out of Switzerland and France in the early 20th century. Another example, mobile phones from, I guess, somewhere around the mid-90s. They were clunky, the interfaces sucked a lot of the time, you didn't have reception, and a lot of people were not really that enthusiastic about mobile phones. Why? Because they had a phone at home. So why do I need to carry one around? In fact, it's kind of an invasion of my privacy. I don't want people to call me all the time. And in fact, I certainly would not want to make any phone calls in public. Another example, the internet. So the first message on the internet was sent in the late 70s. But even by the mid-90s, internet was still kind of sucky to a lot of typical people. First of all, it would take, half an hour just to download that Guns N' Roses song. Sorry, half a day to download that Guns N' Roses song. You wouldn't be able to use the phone while you were doing stuff. It made that horrible, horrible, horrible screeching sound that many of you may still remember. And yeah, unless you were into Star Trek and pornography, there wasn't all that much yet to do on the early days of the internet. All right, so now Bitcoin. To be quite honest, even though we love Bitcoin, it's still a bit sucky. People still lose money. People lose money to scams. People lose money to gambling and shitcoin casinos. And if you have to believe some of the media, Bitcoin is the worst single thing to happen to the climate and to human welfare in general. But the point here is, none of that is unusual for new technology, particularly one that tries to fundamentally change one of our most fundamental institutions in society, namely money and payments. Okay, so let's now zoom out from all the complexity and all the noise and try to offer a really easy explanation of actually what Bitcoin is. Let's start with an example. When a bank wants to teach their customers how to use their online banking application, how do they do that? Do they teach them about clearance and settlement system? Do they teach them the difference between settlement, finality, and processing? Do they explain the difference between SWIFT, ACH, Fedwire, and chips? No, that probably would not be a very good idea to teach your customers how to use the application. The internet. How does your internet service provider explain to you how to use the internet? Do they give you a deep dive on, switches, wireless access points? Do they tell you the difference between TCP and UDP packets? Do they give you a giant map with all the global submarine cables and all the internet exchange points that are used to send your information around the world? Obviously not. Because if this kind of knowledge were required in order for you to use the internet and a mobile banking application, 99.99% of the world would never use those things. Just like the internet and online banking, if you look into the details of Bitcoin, it is really very complex. It requires a lot of different areas of knowledge, like I already stated, cryptography, system design, monetary policy, and so on. So if you really want to understand the details about the blockchain, about how transactions are processed, about what proof of work is and why that's difficult to learn. And a lot of newcomers seem to have the idea that they need to understand all of those details. But that is really impossible for most newcomers, unless you're some kind of Einstein who happens to know about all those things more or less already. But the point is, you don't really need to understand all those things in detail in order to understand, I usually hate people that use quotes, but just to be clear, understand what Bitcoin is. What you do need, however, as a newcomer, is a high-level functional sense of what Bitcoin is. So let's offer a high-level functional explanation. All right, well, there are probably a couple of different answers that you can give here. There isn't one best explanation, but we will give you an explanation that we think works quite well. Bitcoin is a new type of money. A type of money that, by contrast to euros, dollars, yen, Swiss francs, is very much controlled by the users of that money. And unlike what pictures like this seem to indicate, which you see a lot in the media, Bitcoin is digitally native. And just like we can use different methods to pay with euros, for instance, you can send it in the mail to someone, you can hand physical euros to a cashier, you can use your online banking, you can use PayPal, you can use credit cards, and so on. There are different ways, different methods that you can pay with Bitcoin. Now, there are probably quite a few things that you can list here, but I guess the core distinction, perhaps that is most important to know, is the difference between on-chain payments and Lightning payments. Lightning payments are cheap and fast, but generally for small amounts of money. On-chain payments are for bigger amounts of money. To draw a comparison, suppose if you wanted to send your nephew $20 for his birthday or something like this, you could just send that money in the post. But if you wanted to make a down payment on a house, it would not be that great of an idea to send that in the post. You probably want to use your online banking application for that. Drawing the analogy with Bitcoin, if you wanted to send your nephew $20, which is some small amount of Bitcoin, you can use Lightning, but if you wanted to make a down payment on the house, you would use on-chain payments. Okay. So why care about any of this? We already have dollars, francs, euros, and we have an uncountable number of ways that we can actually pay people, right? We can send cash in the post, we can hand it to people in person, we can use credit cards, we can use PayPal, we can use TransferWise, we can use Moneybird. There are like all these different ways to pay people. So why on earth do we need yet another money and additional payment systems? Well, to sort of sum it up, I think really the core property of Bitcoin that makes it different is that Bitcoin is much more empowering to its users, much more so than our standard money and our standard payment system. Let me just give one example of what I mean by this, just to make it palpable. So, cash. You can hold cash in your wallet. You don't need anybody to hold it for you. And Bitcoin can be used like that. You can hold your own Bitcoin. Although, if we want to be exact, you don't really ever hold your own Bitcoin because Bitcoin are housed on a globally distributed ledger called the blockchain. However, what you can hold are one or more secrets to move one or more amounts of Bitcoin on the blockchain. And because other people do not have those secrets, they can't move your money, right? So that's what you hold. These secrets are called keys. Okay. You may have heard the expression, not your keys, not your coins. That's what this is. Okay, also kind of like money. If I'm standing in the grocery store and I'm paying someone in cash, I don't need to first give it to some other person that then hands it to the cashier. No, I just hand it over directly. Bitcoin, I can do kind of the same. I don't need to, I can if I want to, but I don't need to send my Bitcoin first to, let's say, a Bitcoin bank that then sends it to someone else. No, I can send it directly to whoever I want to pay. No one else in between has to hold that money. Okay, so this was just an example of what I mean when I say Bitcoin empowers people. Aldert is going to give you some more ideas and thoughts about this, but just to make clear what we mean by this. All right. So high-level functional explanations are never exactly accurate. I do see a few people in this audience who I know a lot about Bitcoin, some of them more than me, and they will understand that this is not, what I just said was not entirely 100% accurate, but it is roughly accurate enough. That's really what you need in order to start using Bitcoin. And that's really important. So if you are new and you want to learn about Bitcoin, the way we learn about technologies is not by reading a whole bunch of things, watching a whole bunch of podcasts, going to conferences and only listening to guys like me. No, you download the wallet and you try to use a little bit and see how it works. This is also, can you imagine that we try to learn about, cars and mobile phones and the internet just by hearing it described to us? That doesn't work. Okay. With that, I would like to hand it over to Aldert, who will give us some more ideas in the ways that Bitcoin empowers people and sort of the core principles you need to know in order to use it well. Okay.
Thank you. So, thanks to Jan. Sorry, let me talk into the microphone. Okay, so thanks to Jan, you now have like a general idea of what Bitcoin is, or at least gain some new perspectives on how it can change your life or what it means in essence. So let us focus now on why there are so many people that love Bitcoin for what it is, what it enables for individuals in terms of this empowerment that Jan alluded to, and also how it can improve society as a whole and offer hope for a better future. So let's focus first on freedom technology. Bitcoin is freedom technology, you could say, because it leverages our personal freedoms. If all goes well, Bitcoin could become a new foundation for a more free and fair open economy. Why is that the case? Because you can pay anyone, anywhere, at any time, and no one can censor that transaction. Why is that so? Well, in essence, because no one, and at the same time everyone, is in charge of that network. So in a way you could say that Bitcoin offers you to live your life as you see fit, to spend your money or your time anywhere, at any time. And this offers optionality. It offers people a way to find their own path. And if we look at what this enables, it enables, in a sense, a higher autonomy of your own finances. But with that comes a lot of responsibility as well. Only you are now responsible if you decide to either spend your money today or to save some for the future. And like this glass building over here, Bitcoin is very transparent. So what does that mean? You can look up and verify pretty much everything that happens on this network. And because that is the case, it reduces the needed trust for middlemen. Instead, you just have to trust the numbers, and to an extent, you have to trust the software and developers as well. So, green light everywhere. Bitcoin, like we just discussed, enables you to do as you please, but only within the confinements of the consensus rules. So what does that mean? It means that everyone on the network guards these rules because all incentives align the network participants. Now, and this enables a network without rulers. In a way, you could also say that Bitcoin frees up time. Bitcoin is time, in a way. Like the saying goes, time is money and money is time. When you go to work, you transform your energy, your time, into money. And Bitcoin allows you to save and store that money. So you can spend it later on the things that you truly value. So the notion that Bitcoin is time and time is money leads us to savings, which is one of the main reasons Bitcoin is so loved by many. What are savings anyway? You could say that it is a way to defer from consumption in the now to spend later with a greater, potentially higher financial reward in the future. So instead of buying a new phone every year, you could save up to buy that sports car that you always wanted. Now, when you want to save money, of course, it's important that you save that into something that cannot be easily created from thin air or by fiat. And Bitcoin offers a vehicle to do just that. In a sense, it transforms energy into Bitcoin, which you could see as a claim on the energy of others. So, because Bitcoin is very scarce and the supply is limited to 21 million coins, and also because the inflation declines very slowly over time, it is an excellent savings device. It allows you to store value for future use. And as more and more people join this revolutionary monetary network, the purchasing power of this Bitcoin goes up over time. And as humans continuously seek new ways to innovate and to provide more efficient ways to produce value, that means that society as a whole will become more wealthier. Now, the logical following from this is that products over time become cheaper, not more expensive as we are currently experiencing. Now, you might as well say, well, is this true? Because if you look at the Bitcoin price right now over the last year or so, it clearly buys you less now than it did before, right? This is because Bitcoin is an emergent store of value and it is highly volatile. But as more people join the network, that volatility will ease gradually. And over a long period of time, you can be pretty certain that at some point it will buy you more than it does today. All right, let's have a look at these white cushy things. What do they have to do with Bitcoin? In a way, you could say that Bitcoin is the ultimate marshmallow experiment. And for those that don't know, this was a study conducted by Stanford researchers where they offered a child a marshmallow with the promise of doubling that every 10 minutes. So, but only if the child was able to stop himself from consuming it. And that study found that the children that were able to wait for a longer period of time, they tended to have better life outcomes, so like better careers, etc. Now this next one is personally what I think is a very interesting one, is that Bitcoin is also measurement technology. Over time, humanity has developed various ways to measure stuff, to quantify stuff. We have, for measuring distance, we have the meter, for example. And for temperature, we have Celsius, right? So, but what tool do we have for measuring value? You could be inclined to say that maybe dollars or euros would fit that bill, but these are not as stable, they're faulty. Why? Because imagine just that your tape measure, the one you have at home, would grow in size 10% per year. How could you ever build sound buildings, right? So in a way, we could say that Bitcoin is the invention of a new stable unit of measurement. And this allows for better economic planning. It allows society to plan for the future. The emission schedule is known in advance, and the supply is fixed. And because the supply is fixed, all value that we will create will reflect that. Bitcoiners like to theorize that as Bitcoin consumes all stores of value, or most stores of value, and eventually moves to a medium of exchange, and ultimately to unit of account, that all value that we will produce as a society will be at one side of the equation, and Bitcoin will be at the other, providing honest price signals and a reflection of what humankind can achieve. Now, another way that Bitcoin measures things is not only value but also time. Bitcoin, in a way, is a clock. It creates order from chaos every 10 minutes or so when a new block is found by solving cryptographic puzzles. And it anchors this moment of time in the time chain, which is another word for blockchain. And that way we can create an immutable record of history. This one may be a bit the odd one out here. Is energy use, is it a reason to love Bitcoin? Because we see a lot of criticism surrounding that in the media. But let's find out together. So, Bitcoin uses about 0.5% of all electricity use per year, about 100 terawatts or so, a bit more than that. But 0.5%. So that leaves us wondering, how does the other 99.5% of energy use somehow does not boil the oceans, like some people want us to believe? But Bitcoin somehow does that. Also, Bitcoin is an energy sponge. So what does that mean? It is an energy buyer of last resort. Whenever there is low demand from consumers or from industry, Bitcoin jumps in and absorbs all of that excess energy. And it transforms that into economic buying power, a claim on the energy of others at a later time. That's why some people like to call it a battery. Now, some even say that this might accelerate the developments of green technology. And the reasoning here is that green power plants that utilize this surplus energy to mine Bitcoin, in a way, achieve a higher profitability. And these profits could then be invested in further green energy tech. Now, this is great and all, but why should Bitcoin use energy at all? Aren't there like a lot of blockchain technologies out there that use very little energy? That is the case, but let's find out why energy is absolutely essential to the design of Bitcoin. Bitcoin uses proof of work as a consensus mechanism. This means that in order to create new coins, in order to secure the history of transactions and also the agreement on that, it uses energy. And this energy secures the network. Now, in a way, you could say that Bitcoin, instead of printing money out of thin air, it prints money from energy. And this helps Bitcoin to become hard money. As stated in this example here, I think we can all agree that a lot of blood, sweat, and tears went into designing and building this library. So as you can see, proof of work is self-evident. It requires a lot of energy and effort to produce quality. So there is no free lunch. This is a bit beside our scope of today, but you could question yourself, why should we limit our use of energy at all? Because energy has propelled humanity forward for thousands and thousands of years. Instead, we could focus our efforts on reducing harmful emissions that sometimes are linked to energy use. Alright, so our last chapter, or last reason to love Bitcoin is that it provides hope. It provides hope for a more robust society. In an unstable world, it provides solid ground. And it allows families that got struck by situations or circumstances that they did not ask for to move to a better place. And this time without having to leave everything behind. For others, it allows, for others that drown in debt, for example, or have a hard time paying their energy bills, it allows for hope for better times. So this slogan here, as Jan already mentioned, fix the money, fix the world. What this means is that most Bitcoiners believe that most of the issues that face society today are the result of a very shaky, unstable foundation of our economic layer. And Bitcoin might just be that technology that solves that. Bitcoin teaches the mind, it trains our mind to think in longer time frames, because it buys more tomorrow than today. This knowledge or this experience sort of expands your mind and allows society to plan for longer time frames. And also, in a way, you could say that leads to a more durable society where we build quality products and services that last for longer times and lead to less wasteful consumption. So Bitcoin will allow us to build for generations, for decades and for centuries, instead of months or days. And this allows us to cherish time again, to spend with our loved ones. Alright, so we now know we all fell in love with Bitcoin by now. So it's time to focus on a more practical side, and let's focus on how to make Bitcoin easy to use. And let's start with saving, because this is how most people use Bitcoin today. Wallets, unlike many people believe, don't hold your Bitcoin. Bitcoin lives on the blockchain and never leaves the blockchain. So instead, what wallets are essentially a set of keys that allow you to move that Bitcoin to a different address. Keys are essential to using Bitcoin. Private keys allow you to sign transactions, and the public key generates addresses that other people can use to pay you. And as we see in the media, a lot of users are plagued by hacks. Their funds are stolen left and right, and this leads, of course, to a damaged brand image, you could say, for Bitcoin. But the main reason is why this happens is that people trust their coins with others. If you have coins at an exchange, that means that they hold the keys. And you don't. You just have access to an account. You don't have access to your Bitcoin. So when it comes to choosing a good option to store or save your Bitcoin, here are a few. And as you can see, the choice seems pretty easy, right? You may want to own your own money. But it has trade-offs. It requires more responsibility and also more knowledge about the technology. And this is why for some novice users, they like to use exchanges because it's more easy, but also it has a slightly higher risk to get hacked. Once you do decide to hold your own keys, there's still a chance to be hacked. But that's often because you either store it digitally or you accidentally gave it to someone. So don't do that. And these seeds, these often are shaped in a way where they are formatted in 12 or 24 words combinations. And these provide access to all of your private keys. So you better be safe with that. Now, you probably want me to point to a best solution to own or save Bitcoin, but honestly, there is none. It all depends on context, it depends on your personal preference, and also on your time frame. So most people actually choose to use a combination of these in order to spread some risks. Okay, now there may come a time where you want to spend your Bitcoin. And for about a decade, this was the main way to spend your Bitcoin, by using this address that consists of letters and numbers. And you had to copy paste that into a different wallet. It was quite cumbersome. But in the recent years, this has changed. Now most wallets offer these QR codes that you can simply scan and then go about your day. Still, a lot of criticism is around the fact that most people don't use Bitcoin for their daily expenses. They don't buy their coffee with it. And this is mainly because most people like to actually save their Bitcoin, but also because it's simply hard to spend. It's very slow, it's expensive, it's public, and also impractical to transact on the blockchain. So the blockchain isn't very feasible or suitable to support these payments. It supports about 7 transactions per second. So it cannot handle all economic activity for society. And even if it could, we could ask ourselves, is that what we want? You know, to have this open network that displays even your morning cappuccino? I guess not. So, but over the last few years, developers have been hard at work in building a new layer on top of Bitcoin, a payment layer. And this is called Lightning. So you can now use a frictionless way to pay others, a quick way. What is Lightning, you say? Well, in a way you can compare that to a bar tab, where two parties open a channel with each other, a connection, that allows them to quickly send some funds back and forth. And if one decides to leave that digital bar, then that bar tab will simply get settled on the blockchain. Also, you can route payments for others, which means that the Lightning protocol sort of resembles a network. Now, like I said, Lightning is a lot quicker than on-chain payments, and also it is more private and it is way less expensive. And this allows users of especially mobile wallets to experience Bitcoin like never before, where they can quickly pay someone and go about their day. If Bitcoin succeeds and if Lightning succeeds in becoming successful, this may lead to the fact that Bitcoin will change from a medium, a store of value, to a medium of exchange, a payment layer. As you have seen by now, it's pretty hard to explain Bitcoin. So if you want to explain it to others or onboard others to Bitcoin, your friends and family, you need some guidance for that. Because in the end, if we want more humans to use Bitcoin, we need to be human ourselves. And that means we have to use human language. We have to use analogies. We have to use concepts, parallels, we have to have a relatable language. that people are familiar with. And we should provide experiences that are fun and quick and allow grandma to use Bitcoin. So this is a question that we ask ourselves at Synonym, the company that we work, which is, how can we as Bitcoiners make sure that a future materializes that we would like to see for ourselves, but also for our children? And also, how can we make Bitcoin even easier? So I would like to end here with a small teaser, because we're going to try to answer that question tomorrow. So please join us at 6 p.m. where our CEO will introduce More Than a Wallet. And with this, we would like to conclude this masterclass. Welcome to the rabbit hole. So we now have some time for questions, and over here you can see some topics that we discussed. So, yeah.
Hello. We talked about wallets, hot wallets. Okay. Hello, 1, 2. Does it work? No? Okay. Okay, yes. You got me? Okay. We talked about wallets. There are cold wallets, hot wallets, and you talked about Synonym. You are more than a wallet. But what if you have over 1,500 coins, so you can't use Ledger or other wallets like that, and you want to have a secure wallet? Do you have a recommendation list? Because I think that's the point. When we go to the bank, we say, okay, the money got less, but you don't lost it.
Yeah. I think in that specific case, most people would choose like a multi-sig configuration, which means that at least one party holds one of your keys, and then you would have about 2 or 3 keys yourself. So in that way, you don't have the full responsibility of your own money, but also you don't trust like the full the company or the bank that holds it for you with your full funds.
Okay.
Add something. Yep. Yeah. So I would say to anybody that has 1,500 coins and cannot answer that very well, you should not be owning 1,500 Bitcoin. Look, I also don't throw my money into commodity markets because I'm not very familiar with commodity markets. Maybe I will, have a little bit of my net worth in something because I trust one of my advisors. But that is really a lot. Well, it kind of depends on where you're coming from, how much money you have. But if, 1,500, that's really a lot of money. So you should be kind of more comfortable with it before you have that kind of money. And definitely, if you're just starting out with Bitcoin, always experiment with little bits of money. Like we would be the last people to tell you, throw all your money at Bitcoin. That's certainly not a good idea. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? We have one here.
Hi. So basically, my question would be, what is this future that you envision where Bitcoin is easier? How do you see it? What is your vision of that future?
Well, let me answer that first, so maybe you can make some. Like I said in the presentation, when we invent really new things, like cars or the internet or something, what we do is we invent the thing first, and then we optimize it and make it intuitive for people. And we are about halfway in that journey with Bitcoin. So we definitely have, Bitcoin is much more pleasant experience than 10 years ago when I started with Bitcoin. But we're not quite there yet. So, even things like, Lightning and Bitcoin, probably at some point we will probably start abstracting from all of that. I don't have an exact answer for it. And that's one of the big challenges that we currently as an industry face because, good user experiences are really, really hard. But
yeah, I think I would summarize it as when the end user does not really realize that they're using Bitcoin, but are still experiencing the benefits, I would say that's a point where we have reached maturity on that. Any other questions?
Not all at once, please.
What about you guys?
In the corner.
Ah.
What do you think about Litecoin?
We actually have a special slide for that. So the difficult thing is explaining the difference between Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, right? But the main difference is that all or most of these others are printed out of thin air. And Bitcoin is hard to produce, it is distributed, it is decentralized. And these are key features. It is censorship resistant, which is also not something that we see with the others. Like Ethereum, for example, is currently experiencing a lot of compliance, regulatory pressures. And that's the main difference, I would say. So Bitcoin is limited, but the amount of shitcoins you could have are infinite.
Maybe I can add a little bit to that. This empowerment that you really have users in control and you really empower them, that's really, I don't want to say it's exclusively true for Bitcoin, but probably pretty much. And that's because of Bitcoin's network effects, Bitcoin's history. For many different reasons, Bitcoin is decentralized and distributed in the way that these other systems are. A lot of people think that creating a decentralized system is just copying some code, changing the block size times and then running your own network, but it doesn't work like that. So, just to give an example, we're from the Netherlands. If you went to, I don't want to offend anyone here, but if you went to Russia, right, and you translated the Dutch constitution into Russian and you threw it down in the middle of the red square, it's not like all of a sudden Russia is going to be a constitutional monarchy like the Netherlands. We could hope, but it isn't. And Bitcoin is like that. You cannot just copy the code and recreate something. Like this thing has a history, it has network effects, and you cannot very easily recreate those. Yeah.